Welcome back to our channel, where we explore the most captivating and explosive narratives unfolding in Genoa City. Today is a magnificent day to delve into the intricate webs of deception, ambition, and heartbreak that define our favorite families. We are immediately plunging into a storyline that promises to irrevocably alter the landscape of the Abbot and Newman dynasties forever. The atmosphere in Genoa City has reached a fever pitch, culminating in a grand, opulent event hosted by Newman Enterprises. The sprawling ballroom, adorned with cascading crystal chandeliers and populated by the absolute elite of the corporate world, was meticulously designed to project an image of impenetrable strength and familial unity. However, beneath the glittering facade of expensive champagne, tailored suits, and forced diplomatic smiles, a catastrophic storm was brewing with terrifying intensity. The Newman family, long accustomed to projecting an aura of absolute dominance and control, was entirely oblivious to the ticking time bomb walking among them. Claire, a young woman who had fought desperately to overcome a lifetime of severe trauma, manipulation, and isolation to finally find a place within this powerful dynasty, was carrying a secret so heavy it threatened to crush her very soul. The opulent surroundings stood in stark, sickening contrast to the agonizing emotional torment tearing her apart from the inside out, setting the stage for a public reckoning that would shatter the foundational pillars of two legacy families. For agonizing weeks, Claire had been suffocating under the weight of an unimaginable and grotesque reality. The fragile, beautiful bond she had painstakingly built with her mother, Victoria, had been violently severed by the ultimate maternal betrayal. Claire had discovered not only her own unexpected pregnancy by her former lover, Kyle Abbott, but the apocalyptic truth that Victoria was simultaneously carrying a child by the exact same man. The psychological devastation of this dual revelation had pushed Claire to the absolute brink of her sanity, unraveling years of hard-won emotional progress. Every lingering glance from her mother, every agonizing memory of Victoria's condescending pity during their previous encounters, fueled a dark, consuming fire within Claire's heart. She was no longer the vulnerable girl seeking acceptance and grace. She was a woman profoundly wronged, armed with the undeniable truth, and driven by a desperate, feral need to reclaim her narrative from the people who had so callously destroyed it. The Grand Newman event provided the perfect, agonizingly public venue for her to execute her vengeance. As the evening progressed, the immense tension in the room remained hidden beneath the polished veneer of high society pleasantries, but Claire moved with a cold, calculated, and terrifying purpose. She navigated through the sea of powerful executives and socialites, her eyes locked onto the two individuals who had orchestrated her emotional demise. Kyle Abbott and Victoria Newman stood together, their posture reflecting a dangerous, intoxicating mix of corporate arrogance and the nervous energy of their illicit, secretive alliance. They were entirely unprepared for the sheer force of the hurricane about to make landfall. Claire's approach was deliberate, her presence demanding an immediate, chilling silence from those standing in their immediate vicinity. The air grew thick and heavy, the ambient noise of the gala seeming to fade into a muted, distant hum as the surrounding guests instinctively sensed the impending detonation of a scandal that would echo through the halls of Genoa City for decades to come. Without a single word spoken aloud to the gathering crowd, Claire's actions commanded the absolute, undivided attention of everyone present. She confronted Kyle and Victoria, the raw, unfiltered agony of her betrayal radiating from her every movement and piercing gaze. With trembling but fiercely resolute hands, she produced the undeniable, physical proof of her living nightmare, a positive pregnancy test, thrusting it into the space between them like a drawn weapon. The visual impact was immediate, visceral, and devastating. She forced Kyle to look at the undeniable consequence of his reckless actions, demanding silent but absolute acknowledgement of the life growing inside her. The atmosphere in the ballroom crystallized into pure, unadulterated shock. The horrifying realization of what Claire was presenting began to ripple through the crowd, turning the celebration of corporate triumph into a theater of profound humiliation, horror, and generational shame. The physical reaction from Kyle Abbott was instantaneous and catastrophic. The color drained entirely from his face, leaving him a pale, trembling shell of the confident, ambitious executive he portrayed to the world. His entire reality, built on risky corporate maneuvers and an arrogant rebellion against the Newman patriarch, crumbled into dust in a matter of excruciating seconds. Faced with the undeniable reality of Claire's pregnancy, Coupled with his horrifying secret knowledge of Victoria's identical condition, Kyle experienced a complete psychological collapse right there on the illuminated ballroom floor. The sheer crushing magnitude of his monstrous recklessness crashed down upon him, paralyzing him with an inescapable, suffocating guilt. He was trapped in a nightmare of his own making, unable to formulate a defense, unable to escape the piercing, accusatory stares of the Genoa City elite, who were witnessing his absolute, undeniable ruin. Having delivered the crushing, paralyzing blow to Kyle, Claire then turned her agonizing wrath toward her mother. The dynamic of the confrontation shifted instantly from the reckless lover to the ultimate betrayer. Claire's eyes, filled with a terrifying, heartbreaking mixture of profound hatred and shattered innocence, bore into Victoria's very soul. She visually dissected her mother's hypocrisy, challenging the fundamental core of Victoria's morality and maternal instinct. This was the woman who had previously looked down upon Claire with a sickening sense of pity, who had offered condescending advice, only to engage in a sordid, secretive affair with her own daughter's former partner. Claire's silent, furious interrogations stripped away Victoria's stoic, corporate armor, exposing her as a woman who had failed her child in the most fundamental, unforgivable way imaginable. The mother-daughter bond, once a beacon of hope for Claire's redemption, was publicly and brutally incinerated before the eyes of their peers. Victoria Newman, a woman who had spent her entire life expertly navigating the treacherous waters of corporate espionage and patriarchal control, found herself entirely defenseless against the raw, undeniable truth of her daughter's pain. The public humiliation was absolute and paralyzing. The societal elite, her business rivals, and her family watched in stunned, breathless silence as the staggering magnitude of her betrayal was laid bare. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on her chest as she realized the permanent, irreparable damage she had inflicted upon her own flesh and blood. The secretive joint venture with Kyle, initially designed as a rebellious, empowering strike against Victor's authority, had devolved into a biological and moral disaster that would forever stain her legacy. Victoria stood frozen, the horrifying reality of her dual pregnancy scandal wrapping around her like a suffocating, inescapable shroud. The immediate fallout of the public confrontation sent seismic shockwaves through the very foundations of the Abbott and Newman estates, leaving a trail of emotional destruction in its wake. However, for Claire, the explosive revelation did not bring the cathartic peace she had so desperately craved. Instead, it plunged her into an even deeper, more agonizing state of isolation. The overwhelming, crushing weight of carrying the child of the man who had simultaneously impregnated her mother became an unbearable psychological burden. Every waking moment was a torturous reminder of the grotesque, tangled web she was trapped in. The thought of bringing an innocent child into a world defined by such profound betrayal, hypocrisy, and familial corruption began to tear at the fragile threads of her sanity. In the quiet, suffocating darkness of her solitude, Claire was forced to grapple with a decision that would alter the course of her life forever, driven by a desperate, agonizing need to sever the biological tie to her trauma. Consumed by a dark, agonizing sense of betrayal, and teetering dangerously on the edge of a total mental breakdown, Claire made the excruciatingly solitary decision to terminate the pregnancy. It was a choice born not of malice or callousness, but of absolute, desperate emotional survival. She simply could not allow her body to remain a vessel for the physical manifestation of Kyle and Victoria's sins. The decision was cloaked in the utmost secrecy, a frantic, heartbreaking attempt to reclaim some semblance of control over her own body and her fractured destiny. She navigated the clinical, cold reality of the medical procedure with a numb, hollow detachment, shielding herself from the immense emotional magnitude of the act. For a brief, fragile moment, Claire believed she had successfully buried the final remnant of the nightmare, hoping the silence would afford her the space to slowly rebuild her shattered psyche away from the prying eyes of her family. However, in the interconnected, viciously observant world of Genoa City, secrets are a currency rarely kept hidden for long. The fragile walls of Claire's privacy were destined to crumble under the weight of the city's relentless scrutiny. The fatal leak occurred not through a grand, orchestrated betrayal, but through a careless, devastating oversight that shattered her hidden reality. A highly sensitive medical document, detailing the termination of the pregnancy, was inadvertently left exposed. Whether it was discovered by a prying staff member, intercepted through the Newmans' extensive, ever-watchful surveillance network, or whispered about by a confidant in a moment of reckless anger, the unvarnished truth escaped its confines. The highly confidential information regarding Claire's secret abortion began to slither through the hidden channels of the city's elite, transforming a deeply personal trauma into the latest, most explosive weapon in an ongoing brutal family war. The leaked information spread like wildfire, inevitably reaching the towering, formidable figures of the Abbott and Newman patriarchs. When the devastating truth reached Jack Abbott, the horror and outrage were palpable, shaking him to his very core. Jack, already drowning in the existential crisis of Billy's newly discovered Newman DNA, was violently struck by this new, unimaginable catastrophe. His profound despair was not directed solely at Claire's desperate act, but at the monstrous, unfathomable recklessness of his son, Kyle. Jack realized with a sickening, heartbreaking clarity that Kyle's actions had caused profound, generational trauma, driving a fragile young woman to make an agonizing choice. The stain on the Abbott legacy was expanding rapidly, painting the family not as victims of circumstance, but as architects of profound human suffering. Jack's disappointment in Kyle morphed into a deep, agonizing sorrow for the absolute destruction of their family's honor and moral standing. Conversely, the reaction from Victor Newman was one of absolute, terrifying patriarchal fury. The revelation of the secret abortion shattered Victor's desperate, lifelong need for absolute control over his bloodline and his family's legacy. His wrath was a terrifying force of nature, directed intensely and mercilessly at Kyle Abbott for defiling the Newman family and creating a scandal of unprecedented depravity. Victor viewed the entire situation as a grotesque insult to his authority, a direct result of the Abbott family's inherent chaos infecting his own carefully curated empire. Furthermore, his blinding anger radiated toward Victoria for her undeniable complicity in the disaster, her illicit affair having set off the catastrophic chain reaction that led to Claire's unbearable trauma. The patriarch's rage promised a swift, merciless retribution, ensuring that the consequences of this scandal would be felt in every boardroom and living room in the city. The convergence of guilt, blame, and impending war created a suffocating atmosphere of dread that blanketed both estates. Kyle Abbott remained trapped in his severe psychological collapse, fully aware that his actions had not only destroyed his relationship with Claire and Victoria, but had now ignited the unrestrained, lethal fury of Victor Newman and the profound, heartbreaking disappointment of his own father. Victoria was left to navigate the smoldering ruins of her life, her ultimate maternal failure now compounded by the devastating knowledge of what her daughter had been driven to do in secret to escape the pain. The lines of loyalty were permanently blurred, replaced by a toxic, volatile mixture of regret and the desperate need for self-preservation. The families, once bound by corporate rivalry and occasional uneasy alliances, were now locked in a deeply personal, unforgiving conflict that promised no survivors. As the dark storm clouds of vengeance gather ominously over Genoa City, the fragile peace has been entirely obliterated, leaving nothing but the scorched earth of broken promises and shattered lives. With Victor Newman marshalling his vast, intimidating resources to obliterate Kyle Abbott, and Jack struggling to salvage the remaining fragments of his family's soul, the stage is set for a brutal, uncompromising war. Claire, standing resolute yet broken at the epicenter of the devastation, has struck a match to the powder keg, but the ensuing explosion threatens to consume them all in a blaze of retribution. Will the Newman and Abbott dynasties survive the apocalyptic fallout of this generational betrayal, or will the crushing weight of their collective sins finally drag them into the abyss? The battle lines are drawn, the secrets are laid bare, and the true, devastating cost of their actions is only just beginning to be paid.